Welcome to the most important week of the year for the podcast industry. Welcome to Podcast Movement 2025.
Oh, hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay. What would happen to your podcast if someone started a podcast with the same title as yours, or one that's very, very similar, or someone challenged whether you actually own your show, or claimed that you were infringing on their show, or a sponsor refused to pay, or accused you of not delivering the ads you said you were going to deliver, or worse? Would you be ready? Or would you be scrambling to clean up the mess? Most podcasters really sort of ignore the legal stuff, and they avoid it, or they hope to figure it out at some mythical time they call later, right? And I get it. The legal stuff is confusing, it's intimidating, not nearly as fun as just creating content and being out there, being visible. But if you're serious about building something, whether an entire business around a podcast, or the podcast is a part of your business, or you're building the brand, or just a creative legacy with your show, getting your legal affairs handled is one of the smartest things that you can do to make your growth easier and more comfortable, to build more confidence about this. So what do you say I give you some clear, confidence-boosting roadmap for covering the 4 core legal issues that I like to talk about, that every podcaster really needs to understand? They are your business, team, intellectual property, and all that third-party outside facing in, inward facing out kind of stuff. Should we dig in? All right. Well, getting the legal affairs in order isn't just about avoiding lawsuits and ownership disputes. It's about building a foundation that lets you feel confident, take bold steps, confident, calculated risks that help you grow and monetize and succeed. So let me ask, who here already has all the legal stuff squared away? Okay, well, you're welcome to stay. Of course, but for the rest of us, why don't we jump into those 4 pillars of legal protection that you should have for your podcast? Give me a yippee or a sign of some sort to let me know. All right. That's what I like to hear. Awesome. All right. Well, here's the big picture. These are the 4 key legal areas I want to talk about today. Think of them as a checklist of sorts. Your business, your team structure, your intellectual property, strategy, and the kinds of issues that come from outside the immediate circle, your third-party relationships, and those kinds of things. So we'll start out, I'll tell you a little bit about me, and then we'll get into the substance of things. So I've been a practicing entertainment, I'm Gordon Firemark, that's my name. For over 33 years now, I've been practicing entertainment and media law out in Los Angeles. I'm a podcaster myself. When I first started podcasting, I started as a guest, starting around 2006, I think, so right at the beginning, the early days of podcasting. And then I started my own show in 2009. It's called Entertainment Law Update. That's going back a ways. And when I did that, I went and I started to do my due diligence. I wanted to make sure I was doing things legally, doing things by the book. And what I found out was there wasn't no book. So I wrote it. The Podcast, Blog, and Media Producers Legal Survival Guide. New Media Producers Legal Survival Guide. And that was the product of some research and thinking about this, and that was great. I'm also a college professor and law school professor and an entrepreneur myself. I founded Easy Legal Brands, where we offer legal forms and templates and products like Easy Legal for Podcasters. It's a course, a comprehensive template pack and course that will teach you exactly how to use them to do all the kind of stuff I'm going to be talking about today, and to handle all of that so you can handle it. If you're a do-it-yourself kind of person, it could be a really good option. So let's dive in now. Business issues. If you are podcasting with any kind of long-term intention, whether you're monetizing now or you're planning to later, you really need to treat what you're doing like a business. That means, first of all, thinking of it like a business, but forming a business entity can be a really good idea. It's not for everybody, but it's definitely something you want to think about and consider. Business entity, like an LLC or corporation. This will protect your personal assets, keep them separate from what you're doing in the podcast, and it'll keep the podcast stuff separate from what you're doing in your other parts of your life. And it also legitimizes what you're doing in the eyes of sponsors and collaborators and partners and the outside world, the audience and stuff. You also need to get your website documents in order. How many people have a website for your podcast? How many have custom terms of use and privacy policy on your... Okay, that's not bad. That's great. That's great. These documents and disclaimers and things, these are your... They're not just legal boilerplate. They really are the contract, your first layer of protection online, your contract with the site visitors and the listeners of the show. So it really makes sense to be in control of these terms so that you're not just relying on whatever the state legislature in your home state decided was the right way to handle these things. You get to decide and control it to an extent. And so if there's ever a problem, you have the roadmap for resolution and protection of your self-protection. So now let's talk about the team. Team issues, this is where a lot of the issues come up. Now, first of all, you might be thinking, well, who has a team with your podcast? All right. Well, if you're thinking, I don't have a team, I'm not going to worry about this, first off, let me start saying, by saying you really should have a team. You just cannot do all of the things, all of the time, all of the way, at least not well. Right? Something's going to give. So, you might actually have a team and not know it. Anybody have an editor who works on the show? They don't have to be an employee, right? They're just someone you hire to do that stuff, right? Maybe you have guests on your show. Guests are a part of the team, sorry, they are. And that means, even though you don't think of it that way, they have some interest in what you're doing. Maybe you have a co-host. Maybe you bring on a virtual assistant or a social media manager, or you have the guests on the show. All of them are part of the team. And every one of those people represents a relationship, right? And a relationship can be a threat. Nice way to think about relationships, isn't it? Well, it can be the kind of thing that needs some clarity. Not something to worry about all the time, but clarity is good. In writing, please. So everyone who touches your show in any way, there should be something in writing that articulates the relationship. You want to make sure you've spelled out who owns what, who's responsible for what they should expect in return, who gets paid, how much and when, and what happens if someone wants out, or if you need to say, sorry, there's the door, right? Now, these are conversations that can feel kind of awkward, but they're 1,000 times easier before there's money and fame and conflict involved in the situation. So ask yourself this, if your co-host were to leave you tomorrow, would you be able to keep the podcast going without any trouble, without any legal trouble? Or might you expect to have some kind of a disagreement or a fight or at least a uncomfortable negotiation? If your answer is anything other than a solid yes, I've got it totally locked in, then this is something you should think about and get an agreement in place. It's like the old saying, good fences make good neighbors. Well, good contracts make good relationships. They lay out the boundaries, right? So that's an important strategy for keeping trouble from finding its way into your life and your show. Is this resonating? Okay. I call that contract a podcast prenup. Kind of tells you what you need to know, right? If relationships are a threat, the prenup is the shield. Some kind of a concrete written contract with anyone who comes in contact with your show. Now, most of the time, that's the simple release with the guest or an independent contractor agreement with your virtual assistant or your social media manager or something like that. Now, if you have a co-host, a co-creator, well, it might be a joint venture agreement or a co-production agreement of some sort. Or it could be the LLC that we talked about. That could be the thing that articulates the nature of that relationship. Make sense? All right. Next topic is that intellectual property strategy that I was mentioning earlier. What does intellectual property even mean? This is the real value behind most podcasts, right? The intellectual property is the umbrella term for the legal frameworks that protect the products of the mind, the things we create in our minds and then embody in some tangible form, right? So your episodes, your title, your logo, your theme music, all of that is intellectual property, either yours or someone else's. So these are the things that are the most valuable assets that you as a creator probably have. and most commonly sort of neglected, glossed over. Intellectual property plays an important role in the content creation process too, right? When you're using other people's stuff, you need permission as well, and we'll talk about that in a second. So we're not going to spend any time on, so as I said, intellectual property is this umbrella term that covers the products of the mind. Patents are one of those kind. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because they don't really have much to do with what most podcasters are doing, but it's put simply, patent law is a 20-year term of exclusivity, protection and ownership of unique, non-obvious inventions or processes or systems. Now, if you have developed something like that, it's important. Do talk to a patent lawyer. That is not a do-it-yourself thing. Patent law is tricky and complicated. All right. Next up is copyright. How many people know what a copyright is? Really? Okay. Copyright protects your creative work, right? If it's original and you've fixed it in some tangible form, you own the copyright. That could be your recordings, your written content, your website copy, your music, your sculpture, your painting, anything. And yeah, you automatically own what you create right from the start when you set pen to paper, essentially. But you can't really enforce that right unless it's registered in the U.S. Copyright Office. That's because you can't file a lawsuit unless you have a copyright certificate to go with it. So if somebody copies your work and you haven't registered it, your options are a little bit limited because now you've got to run down and file the copyright before you can sue, right? So you've got some leverage difference going on and your costs increase. And also, when you have registered your work within the first 90 days or 3 months of first publication, if you do go to court, you can get your attorney's fees paid by the other side if you win. And you don't have to prove your actual damages. That's one of the tricky things in a lot of these cases is, well, yeah, they copied your stuff, but how much did it really cost you? What did it, it hurts, it's not something I like, but how much did you lose? Well, when you have a registered copyright, you don't have to prove that how much you lost. You can just prove it happened, and you can rely on the judge or the jury to give you an award that's sort of commensurate with how egregious the infringement is, anywhere from a couple of $100 up to $150,000 for each infringing copy. Now it can start to get really significant. Also, if you're using someone else's work in your podcast, like music or movie clips or memes of some sort, or spoken word, reading a poem, all those kinds of things, that opens the can of worms that I like to call licensing. Licensing is actually the safest route. Don't just rely on luck that you won't get caught or anything like that. So licensing, really not that big of a mystery. It's the process of getting permission. You identify the work that you want to use and how you plan to use it, what rights you need, right? And then you identify who owns it, ask for permission, negotiate a royalty rate, and get it in writing, right? Now, I said identify what rights you need. They're not going to give you all rights in every universal, throughout the universe in perpetuity. If you're doing a podcast, it's one episode, this much of it for this long, and you can distribute it in these territories. Sometimes that's the whole world. And that's the thing. Copyright protects 5 exclusive rights. The owner of a copyright has the right to make copies, to distribute the copies, to perform the work if it's that kind of work, or display it in public if it's a displayable thing, and to make derivative works. And whenever we incorporate someone else's stuff into ours, we are making a derivative work. So the podcasting is making a copy of you're copying the song into your show, you're distributing it when you publish the show, you're performing it because it's being played as part of the show, and it's a derivative work. So 4 of those 5 rights are considered there. So, whenever I talk about copyright and this stuff, there's always someone who raises their hand and asks about this one thing. Anybody know what I'm referring to? Can't I use it free because isn't it just fair use? And the answer is maybe it is. But the thing is, this is not just an easy get-out-of-jail-free card. Fair use is a legal doctrine that allows for limited use of copyrighted works without permission, but only under certain specific circumstances. And even then, it's a gray area. We have to go through 4 factors for every single complaint about infringement. We look at the purpose and character of the use. Is it commercial or educational, entertaining or informative? Is it somehow transforming what the original's purpose was? Then we look at the nature of the original, the underlying copyrighted work. Is it more factual or more creative? If it's more creative, then it's less likely to look like fair use. If it's a more factual thing, then we don't want to take facts off the marketplace completely, right? Then we look at the amount and substantiality of what you use. This is where the common misconception of, well, I only used 4 bars of music or 15 seconds or something. That's not the measurement. It's the amount and substantiality. So if it's the most important 15 seconds of the song, that could still be pretty substantial. How important was it to the original? And then the fourth factor is the effect on the market for or value of the original. So if there's a market for the original at all, sometimes it's just the right to say no to the use, but sometimes the market could be a licensing market. If you could have asked for and paid for permission, guess what? That's a market for the original. And then, so the impact on the value is you deprived that owner of the right to make that money. So, and here's the catch. Fair use is not a rule. It isn't a automatic permission. It's a defense to a lawsuit. Well, if you have a lawsuit, that means you're in court, someone sued you, and you're getting to talk about this in front of the people who decide whether it was a fair use, the judge and or the jury. And that's an expensive proposition. So, my advice is let's not rely on fair use. You just don't know whether it qualifies until they say it does. So unless you're intentionally pushing this envelope and trying to make a point and prove it, and there are folks out there that do, and if you have the budget to back it up, then unless that's the case, you're always better getting permission, licensing the material, or make something original and avoid the problem altogether. So, next up we have trademarks. A trademark is what protects your brand. Branding and trademark are really sort of synonymous with each other. Remember, what's a brand, right? It's a symbol on the end of a metal rod that was seared into the hide of a cow, right? Well, that's a trademark. A trademark is a distinctive word or phrase or symbol that is used to identify the source of the goods in the marketplace. So things like your podcast title, your logo, your tagline, all of these are trademarkable assets. Now, you get some rights just by adopting and using the brand, but registering is like putting a lock on the front door of the house, right? Protects your brand. So here's the scenario. It comes up a lot, actually. Somebody else beats you to the trademark office and files a trademark on your podcast title. You've been using it for years already. Suddenly, you are looking at a cease and desist letter from somebody who just started up. Or you're trying to register yours and you find out that they've beat you to it, even though you were there first in the marketplace. Now, it's true. Rights come from use, so first in line is first in right, as we say. But without a registration, if the other side registers first, that becomes a big nightmare. In fact, one well-known podcaster in the community, he's here this week, so I won't say his name, but it was a 4-year odyssey. He'd been using his podcast title for 15 years. Came to me saying, I want to register my title. And he said, I think there's somebody else starting a show like mine with a similar title, so let's get it registered. Well, we hustled down and registered with the trademark office, and they sent us a notice back saying, your registration is suspended because this other one is already pending. And they haven't even started a show yet. They filed on an intent to use basis, which you can do. But we had to then wait. Either they started up a show or not. And they kept extending, filing for extensions of their time to start to the tune of 4 years to protect this 15-year-old title. And it cost thousands and thousands of dollars more than it needed to because he had to pay me to keep in touch and push the trademark office to do what they're supposed to do. So here's a pop quiz for you. Do you know whether your podcast name is the only one out there? Is it already trademarked? I know one of you has a trademark on your title, right? Okay. Is it trademark? Anybody have one that someone else has a similar title? Tanya? Oh, okay. All right. So this is the kind of thing you at least want to check on that. Make sure that if there are other shows with similar titles in the marketplace, that it's not going to be too confusing. But if you can, protect yourself. Trademark registration is a good idea. And it's not, most people use a lawyer, but it can be a do-it-yourself project if you kind of know what you're doing. You have the tools and things, and that's not too hard to come by. So, all right. So now we get to the audience-facing stuff, the sponsor-facing stuff, what I refer to as outward-facing, things that come from third parties outside your personal circle, outside the relationships and deals. Like, what if your content causes someone out in the world a problem? Maybe you hurt their reputation because of something you or your guest said, or you outed some private information about a person, those kinds of things, right? This is actually pretty easy to prevent. Journalists have been doing it for years, right? They've been dealing with, actually for centuries, they've been doing this kind of thing. Defamation is a false statement about a person that causes reputation harm when it's published. It's about a person who's identified, specifically recognizable from the context. That's libel in the case of technological stuff. It's slander if it's just spoken in a small group, libel in any other situation. So what's the solution? Make sure what you're publishing is true. Truth is a defense in these cases. And yes, you can be held responsible for what a guest says on your podcast. That means fact check. Check the heck out of those facts. Corroborate anything that could be remotely harmful with multiple sources whenever possible. Last week I had a host come to me and hire me to address a problem where a guest's ex-spouse was the one who was threatening a lawsuit. Yeah, it's a show about helping people deal with and cope with divorce and move on with their lives. And this guest had basically implied that their ex had been abusive during the marriage. So now this ex, because we had the real name of the guest on the show, the ex could be identified by anybody who listened and kind of knew where to look. So if that host had thought to ask some follow-up questions, try to clarify it, well, what do you mean by that? Be specific. What did they do? Those kind of, and get to the truth, that can help. Or if they'd concealed the guest's identity, that would have helped. And this ex wouldn't have been able to point any fingers. So now we get to deal with this potential lawsuit and having to get the guest to indemnify, basically, and swear up and down that it was true and that they'll help us prove it and that they'll defend us in court and all that kind of thing. So fact check. Edit out the stuff that you can't verify and prove with multiple sources. Respect people's privacy. Some dirty laundry just does not deserve to be aired out in public. Just doesn't need it. Think about sex tapes. Do we really need to see a sex tape? And that's not the podcast scenario, but, right? Hulk Hogan put an entire company out of business after they published his sex tape. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that was a matter of public interest. I don't think so, but anyway, right? Okay. All right. Some more outward-facing things you might want to think about. Anytime you're working with someone outside your core team, sponsors, hosts, ad networks, PR firms, again, get it in writing. If there's a mantra from me, it's going to be get it in writing, get it in writing, get it in writing. Who owns what? What's expected of them? What happens if someone drops the ball? What are the payment terms? This is one of the most common concerns with joining a network. Oh, they're going to give me 70% of the revenue generated from the ads they sell. When? You might be surprised to know that it's usually after they get paid, they'll wait 30 or 60 or 90 days and then they'll pay you. But that after they get paid thing isn't nearly as important to them when it's one ad that ran on your show. When they've got 1,000 other ads that ran, do they chase after them and try to collect? I've seen some situations where networks were not so great about that. So the podcaster ran that ad 6 months ago and still hasn't been paid for it. And they're continuing to run more ads and wondering, when am I getting paid? When am I getting paid? So this is a big concern. It's easy to agree on these things when everybody's excited at the beginning of these relationships, but much harder to deal with when the problem has already arisen. Ever had a deal go sideways when something wasn't written down? An agreement with somebody that just didn't go the way you expected it to? Maybe you had to drop the fight because there was just something ambiguous in the deal that you interpreted differently than they did. So precision. Don't let this happen with your show. Precision matters. A good contract isn't just there to protect you. It protects the relationship. It protects them too. It creates that clarity. Now, note that I said a good contract. I've recently been helping a podcast production company with It's a real problem, let's say that. It's a sticky situation. Their co-production partner tried to change the terms of the contract pretty much right after they started the relationship. And they were halfway through the first season of the show, and there was a total power play to take over the show, squeeze my client out of what was starting to look like a really good, likely profitable kind of a show. But it was a contract drafted by our friend, anybody know the lawyer named ChatGPT? Wasn't up to the task. It's like the Dr. Google, right? Same idea, right? So now we're dealing with these hurt feelings, these bruised egos, and a smallish amount of money, but enough to fight over. But, and the show is dead in the water. They've stopped making it because they're engaged in this battle. Does that make you think? Yes, you should write your own contracts. It's important to have contracts, but start from clear, precise, unambiguous templates. There's lots of templates available out there. And be really clear about things. And think about the potential problems. And everything is much easier when trouble comes around if you've got a contract to use as that roadmap. All right. I'm going to finish up. So let me just ask you, who knows what the biggest mistake podcasters make? Biggest legal mistake that causes the most grief and headaches and financial loss and attorney's fees that podcasters sustain, or any creators sustain? Fair use? That's pretty big, but that's not the one I'm thinking of. Anybody have other ideas? Public domain? Oh, you guys are being much too precise. My answer is waiting until it's too late. Just not getting this stuff figured out beforehand, before the trouble comes. They wait till the co-host leaves, or the sponsor flakes out, or the takedown notice arrives, or someone else trademarks their show title. All which can be avoided when you address these things head on in the early days. So at that point, you're not protecting, you're cleaning up a mess. And protection from these things is always cheaper, faster, and less stressful when you handle them proactively. And it gives you peace of mind, so you can focus on growing your platform and serving your audience. And that's what we're here to do, right? Achieve that impact, that influence, and hopefully income. Yeah. All right. So I have some time for questions. Whatever it is, we'll do those. And while we do those, I'll put another slide on the screen. You can get my free legal checklist. So, got a few minutes. Got some questions?
Okay, you were telling about like a podcaster legal checklist, something like that. Do you sell it, or we can have like the templates over there, or you have like a templates guide?
Okay, GordonFiremark.com, just my name.com, is sort of the hub for all my stuff. My templates are on there, my course is on there, my book is on there. This checklist just gets you onto my mailing list, and you can then, I get to tell you all about my templates and courses and checklists and things. So, great. GordonFiremark.com. Another one over. Oh,
Hi.
Back.
Yeah, my name is Lina. I do have a podcast for kids in Spanish, and we do collaborations with authors in Spanish and also musicians.
Yeah.
So this is a very important subject for me because we are not with guests or anything like that. We collaborate with original content.
Yeah.
I would like to know what is recommended. Like for right now, I do have some contracts with authors, which is for distribution.
Yeah.
But we don't have anything about monetizing, right? That will be the next step. And for the musicians, definitely, like, they keep the rights of the music while used on the podcast. But contemplating the idea of monetization for, both ways, what would you recommend me to do, or what will be the next step?
Well, it should be in that same contract. So if the author is giving you permission to do a podcast based on their book, you can build into that same contract a promise that, and if we generate revenue exceeding a certain amount of whatever, we will give you a percentage or a dollar amount or something like that. That would be the way I would approach it. But a lot of times it's just good for the sales of the book, so they may not need that. And the same with the music. If you're paying for a license to the music, revenue share isn't necessary. If they're giving it to you for free, then it makes sense to give them something when you achieve profit. And it should always be tied to your net profit, net income, so that you can deduct your costs before you pay someone else. Does that make sense? Okay. Down here. Oh, down there, and then we'll move over here.
Hey, Gordon.
Hey.
I have the trademark to my to my podcast name, right?
Yeah.
But I think somebody squatted on my domain, the website.com. Is there any recourse? Is there anything I can do with that? And when I say squat, what I mean is the price went from like $250 to $4,500 to go and buy it as a big domain.
So my lawyer's favorite word starts with an M. Anyone know what it is? Maybe. There is a process called the UDRP, Uniform Domain Resolution Procedure, where if you are a trademark owner and someone else has registered your name, it is sometimes possible to submit this. It's basically a lawsuit by mail in the international court, the World Intellectual Property Organization. It's a little bit complicated and expensive, but I'd have to look and see, is it going to cost you more than $4,500, or do you just do the deal, or just do a variation and go for it, hope for the best. It's a challenging situation.
Do we need to trademark the name if we have the host name in the name of the podcast? Let's say Movement by Gordon, where movement is such a generic word.
Well, you probably wouldn't be able to register it,
right?
Because it's such a generic or descriptive word. Basket weaving podcast with Steve. It's descriptive. It tells you exactly what it is. It has to be distinctive in order to be registered. But if you have a distinctive phrase or something, and yours is called, I don't know, Esoterica Unleashed with Gordon, and somebody starts Esoterica Unleashed with Andrew, it's still confusing, isn't it? Right. Could be. Right? Well, maybe they're related. Maybe they're tied together somehow. And one's really good and one's really bad, and now the good one's tarred with the bad one brush, right? And so the with Gordon or the with name thing, it may not be enough to be distinctive and distinguishing. So I recommend go for just register the core, Esoterica Unleashed.
Okay.
And then don't let anybody come in and try to be different by adding a name to it.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a client who has Over Coffee for podcasts, and there's every week we get Over Coffee with Steve or whatever comes up, and I get to write a lot of letters.
Okay, so I have, at the beginning of my podcast, I had everything registered through not an entertainment lawyer, through a copyright lawyer.
Yeah.
How difficult is a trademark lawyer. How difficult is the process? Can you change your lawyer to an entertainment lawyer?
Oh.
And how difficult is that process?
Yeah. So technically, the trademark office considers that the relationship, the attorney-client relationship is over once the registration goes through. Most of us lawyers will keep in touch with you and keep monitoring things and drum up more business when it's time to renew and things like that. But you can choose another lawyer anytime you want. And I actually just recently I did like 5 or 6 people hired me to take over their trademarks where someone else had started messing it up. And it was a matter of me submitting a form, and they had to click a box and sign something, and it was done. So it's pretty easy. And just for clarity, an entertainment lawyer is a lawyer who does business law and intellectual property law in a weird business. So, yeah. I do a lot of trademarks, and I do consider myself a trademark lawyer also, but I'm talking to podcasters, so here I'm the podcast lawyer because I'm doing branding. Any others? One more question.
I just have 2 quick questions.
I said one, no.
So when you record an episode,
Get a little closer to the mic.
so when you record an episode, if I record one episode, should I copyright that, or after I record 4 and then copyright it as a body of work?
So in the recorded music world, it's possible to record like a whole album as one work and things like that. In podcasting, it's really not, because it's coming out on different dates, so the date of publication isn't the same. So unfortunately, there's no way to record that body of work as a group. There is a way of registering certain kinds of works as a group, unpublished works. Mostly that applies to like photographs. So in a perfect world, we'd register each episode separately, but in a perfect world, every one of us would have plenty of money to do that. It's $65 each one,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
So I recommend, if you're not going to register all of them, pick the cornerstones, pick the ones that are most likely to be ripped off and infringed, and at least register those, and keep a close eye for when other registrations happen, other uses happen. And if it's still within that 3 months, rush down there and register.
And should podcasters join a PRO?
A PRO? A PRO only if you're a songwriter.
Okay.
Yeah, you're really not even eligible to join a PR. Well, there's PROs for stand-up comics also now. Yeah, for comedy writers, but it's a a performance rights organization like ASCAP and BMI, and they collect royalties for the use of a song, a composition in pretty much anything, even podcasts. But that's not all the rights you need. Don't get your music licenses from ASCAP and BMI. Do direct deals with the record label and the music publisher that own the rights. Okay? Glad you asked about PROs. I got to say that part. All right. Hey, thanks, everybody, for being here. I hope you'll get on the list and get the checklist, and hit me up in the hall if you have any questions.